Well, good morning and welcome back, everyone, to the European Security Summit. To those who joined us yesterday, and a warm welcome to you if you're joining us for the first time today. We had a packed day yesterday, and today is no different. If you want to catch up on all of the speeches and debates from yesterday's sessions, you can access these via our YouTube channel, and my colleagues will. They don't know this yet, but I'm asking them to do it now. Paste a link into the chat function to that content, and this will also be where eventually all the content from across this week will be published as replays. So coming up shortly, we will be opening with our 5G security session, and this will then be followed by an exciting showcase session, which will be led by the Internet Society. And I'll offer a bit of a deep dive on encryption, security, and privacy in Europe, and focus on the work of the Global Encryption Coalition in Europe. Once those sessions are complete, we'll move on to an early lunch break, and we'll reconvene at around 1:45 for our keynote and our hybrid threat session. And the full agenda can be found once again in the reception area of the platform. A quick thank you once again to all of our sponsors for the Security Summit, namely the Internet Society, Microsoft, SAP, Huawei, Orange, Ericsson, McAfee, the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, and our knowledge partner, RAND Europe. We also got lots of interesting content in the Expo area of the site, so do jump in there when you can. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of the features of the virtual platform. You can find instructions and further details in the reception area of the platform, amongst other helpful details. But I would just say that I'd encourage you to try out the various features, and in particular the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen, where you should post your comments and your questions, and we will do our very best to include these in the discussions by passing them through to the moderators. So with that, I will hand over to Viziola from Cullen International, who's joining us now, and she will moderate this first session on 5G and 5G security. So thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being with us here today. I'm Viziola Pula, Senior Analyst at Cullen International, and I will be your host for this morning's session debating 5G security. 5G will play a key role in shaping Europe's digital future. It is a technology that has the ability to improve our life at every level. For individuals, 5G will provide for faster and more reliable mobile internet, while for the industry, 5G will enable new applications, new innovative business model, and support connected devices. Now, what has been done in Europe to secure 5G networks until today? In July this year, the European Commission published the 5G Risk Management Toolbox, which lists measures to mitigate the risk associated with 5G technologies. Later in July, the Commission published a progress report on the implementation of the measures proposed in the toolbox by member states. Now, during this session, of course, I'm not alone. We will be debating further on this and as well 5G security more broadly with 4 distinguished speakers. And I will give a round of introduction of all our speakers. We will have here today Julie Ruff, Head of Sector, Secure Value Chain at the European Commission, Florian Pennings, EU Cybersecurity Policy Manager at Microsoft, Sauli Palman, Director of the Finnish Cybersecurity Center, and Mikko Karikite, Chief Product Security Officer at Ericsson. Now, before we get started with our discussion and, of course, the remarks of our speakers, I would just like to remind the audience on the other side, please do interact with us, do send us your questions. I can't promise we will be able to address all of them, but we will do our best to put forward for discussion some of the questions. Of course, you can do this by using the options on the right of the platform. And without any undue delay, I would like now to invite to the floor our first speaker for opening this session, which will be Julie Ruff, Head of Sector, Secure Value Chain at the European Commission. Julie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Viziola. Thank you very much, and good morning to all. I hope you can hear me well. So I work for DG Connect, where I'm in charge of implementing the Commission recommendation of last March on the cybersecurity of 5G networks. As you just introduced the topic, Visjola, I won't be long on why this is important, but still I think worth recalling that the rapid and secure deployment of 5G networks is a top priority for the EU. Why rapid? As you just said, I mean, it's going to bring countless opportunities for our economies, for our societies. And why secure? Well, actually, for the same reasons, and because also of what we're experiencing right now, very vividly, this extremely strong reliance of all of us on connectivity. So it's very clear that it is going to be essential to ensure that those networks are appropriately secure from the outset. This actually led last year to heads of states of member states calling for a coordinated approach to 5G cybersecurity in actually an area which is traditionally of strong national competence, but it was considered important to indeed coordinate member states and how they will adapt to this challenge. So in response to this call, the Commission presented this recommendation last year. So you already mentioned some of the results of this work, but I will just take a step back to explain to the audience with some details how we came to the toolbox that was agreed not by the Commission, but by member states' authorities with the support of the Commission and ENISA. So how that started? Well, in the Commission recommendation, we outlined a sort of roadmap with very concrete steps, and basically first calling member states to launch a risk assessment phase. So that's really important to underline that this whole process at EU level is based on a very solid and strong analysis of risks. This risk assessment phase took place last year during spring and summer. First of all, member states individually carried out risk assessments at national level, and then shared those risk assessments, brought them together into an EU coordinated risk assessment. This document was published last year in October, and what it contains is a set of important risks, or those that were considered of highest importance by all the member states and which should be addressed. And well, basically, it identifies those risks on the basis of an analysis of what are the main threats, the main threat actors, so those who are more likely or capable of attacking 5G networks, of looking at the different attack vectors. So how could these attacks be performed, and what are the characteristics of 5G networks which should be taken into account when defining mitigation strategies. So that was the outcome of the risk assessment phase. And following that, member states worked on a set of measures that can be applied to address those risks. So that's actually the toolbox, which was then, as you said, agreed by member states in January this year. What does it contain? It's a list of measures, but it's more than that. So it's a list of measures, and at the same time, recommendations as to which of these measures are the most effective to address specific risks. So it gives guidance about the highest effectiveness measures and how to combine them in what is called mitigation strategies. And that is important because it shows that it's not through one single measure that all the different risks can be addressed. And why is that? It's also because the risks are of different nature, and there are risks that are related to some technical aspects, others that derive from the structure of the supply chain, or the involvement and the important and prominent role of suppliers or vendors in future 5G networks. So this combination of measures is really important, and the toolbox concludes that there are a number of major of steps of major importance that all member states should take. And number one, they should reinforce the powers of the national authorities to impose security requirements and conditions in all these areas. Number two, security requirements on mobile operators should be reinforced. Number three, the risk profile of suppliers should be assessed, and then based on this, appropriate restrictions should be put in place. Number four, member states should apply diversification strategy so as not to depend on any single supplier, and they should do that by looking at dependencies for every single operator, but also more broadly looking at national resilience. And fifth point, member states should also be very vigilant when it comes to the whole 5G ecosystem and value chain, and protect sensitive assets through notably foreign direct investment screening. So that's in a nutshell what the toolbox is about. And from this point on, member states started implementing those measures. I mean, some of them had already started beforehand to strengthen network security. Others took action immediately after the toolbox was adopted. But what was shown in the July report is that basically it triggered a process in each and every member state, and that good progress had already been made just a few months actually after the toolbox was adopted. And considering also the difficult circumstances, this is something that was really noteworthy. And then it looks, this progress report that was published in July, in more detail at the various measures and state of play, and also formulates some conclusions about the next steps, and also the points where special attention should be put about the different measures, and how to ensure again that the implementation of the measures will be as effective and coordinated as possible.
Julie, can I kindly remind you that we would have to wrap up your part in about
that's
1
fine,
minute?
because I'm almost done.
Thanks. To keep up,
Sure,
to keep
no
up with the
problem.
timing.
So
Perfect.
almost done. I was just saying that this progress report took stock of where member states were with the national implementation as of June, and was published in July. Now the member states are still working on implementing the measures. It takes some time. So this is still underway. And in parallel, also, back in January, the Commission announced that we are going to also, from our side, take a number of actions to support the toolbox objectives. So within our areas of competence, with our policies, looking, for instance, closely at the 5G market, and monitoring any potential distortions in terms of trade or competition, looking at how we can support a vibrant ecosystem in Europe now for 5G, but even going into 6G already, and using also our other instruments to encourage cooperation, for example, in the area of standardization, to bring more interoperability in the area of certification. So there is a number of actions that we are carrying forward in parallel. And I think I'll stop there, try to summarize everything that has been done by the member states, national authorities, with the Commission and ENISA. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I think it's very important to remind all the key steps that the toolbox actually proposes for EU member states. And I think was also positive the fact that the toolbox helped member states to trigger the process into implementing more measures to secure 5G technologies. Thank you for this. We will go ahead now with our second speaker for today, which is Florian Pennings, EU Cybersecurity Policy Manager at Microsoft. Florian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Viziola, and welcome to everybody, also the panelists. Great to be here. So you might ask yourself, why is Microsoft on a panel and topic regarding 5G and 5G cybersecurity? Well, two reasons. One, our firm interest and the partnership on everything related to European Union cybersecurity policy. It's not a surprise that ENISA is so involved in the work, and the European Commission has been so involved in the work on cybersecurity policy with the connection to telco. So that's one element, and the other element is that through our cloud technology over the last months, we've been entering the 5G market to partner with telco industry and using a technology like software-defined networks and cloud virtualization, and exploring how can we contribute to deploying secure, resilient, transparent 5G technology. And having said that, so that's why I'm very pleased to be here and share a couple of our thoughts on the 5G cybersecurity debate. If you look at 5G in the European Union over the last years, I've had the pleasure to also work on the public side. And what really has always struck me is that the discussion has been largely about security, trust, transparency, and actually much less about the speed, connectivity, security, how you can apply new applications, hosting new tech. And that's the whole other side of the debate. We're not going to touch that today, but that's really something we should not bear in mind, because sometimes when you talk about this topic, it's a little bit in a negative angle, where it offers so much positive developments, especially from a tech perspective. And it really brings cybersecurity policy, which is my domain where I feel at home, very close to new and emerging tech discussions. And that's also where the challenge lies, I think. To that regard, we really applaud the work being done by ENISA and the Commission. DG Connect, Julie mentioned it correctly, because I think it has been, and I think we also see that it has been a very difficult development and try to maintain that objectivity, to remain inclusive and at the same time be forward-looking. And I think if you look at the products that came out of that cooperation, also using the NIST cooperation group under the whole NIST directive framework, that's excellent, because there was an assessment, there was a threat landscape, and eventually led to a toolbox that gave options for all 27 member states to adhere to and to feel included by. So super useful, and also for us ourselves. I can tell you that within our organization, we're actually taking that toolbox to look at the recommendations, and also cooperate with our engineers looking into the development of our 5G technology there. And I'm very much looking forward to reports that were mentioned by Julie, and the renewed threat landscape by ENISA. Allow me to, in due of time as well, just a couple of policy considerations that I'd like to make to get the discussion also started. First of all, if you look at the 5G debate so far, there are a couple of frameworks already in place that we might be able to use a little bit more actively. One would be, if you look at the NIST directive review that takes place at the moment, there is a NIST cooperation group where government, ENISA and Commission come together, and that might explore to structurally include telcos or 5G technological providers to work a little bit closer on implementing the 5G toolbox, and also to look a little bit more forward. I think that's something that we've seen a little bit, but that can really be further explored by using the NIST directive. Second one would be a cloud certification. It shouldn't come as a surprise that as a large and a global technology service provider, we do believe in harmonization as much as possible, but we understand that there are sometimes certain discussions and developments you need to do in a regional setting. But it doesn't mean you cannot use global or regional certification and standards. And they are very important to ensure, in our opinion, a resilient 5G network deployment. To that, as an example, we are part of the ENISA Auto Working Group working on certification on cloud services. And I expect that this will at one point also be connected to the certification recommendations made in the toolbox. And if not, that will be another suggestion to see, hey, where do they tie up? I know that ENISA and the Commission are working on the Union Rolling Work Program, which sets forth what kind of certification schemes are going to be developed. If we can create synergy there and if industry can help there, that will be truly welcome and also advisable. Third one would be to further explore harmonization of IoT and edge security standards. Quite logical one, I assume. And then if we look at the fourth one, or my fourth recommendation would be, if you look into the toolbox, it makes a very strong call for diversity of suppliers and vendors, and especially given the geopolitical debate around technological providers. That makes sense, and we definitely support that. The fifth recommendation would be on 5G and telco. How can you further invest in that lower level of cooperation? And I'm not talking low as in degrading, but more operational. Start exploring a little bit more operation on sharing threats, incidents, analysis. And you've got several instruments already there in place. Think about ISACs, Information Sharing Analysis Centers. Think about a dedicated CSIRT corporation and working groups that we don't see now as an industry because the CSIRT network is kind of closed. Perhaps there are options there. And my last sixth recommendation would be we strongly support baseline security requirements and harmonize that as well. So if you take all of that together, I think the main message here from Microsoft would be to keep on cooperating, be inclusive with all 5G stakeholders, be it public, private, but also academia. Especially academia sometimes has a forward way of looking that can be very useful to certain political discussions. And we might even want to consider exploring the transatlantic alliance in these discussions. And I'd like to leave it at that and looking forward to a discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Florian. Thank you for all your policy recommendations. Quite interesting. And I think also your presence here shows how far-reaching this technology will be and all the different type of stakeholders that they are concerned and they're involved with 5G technologies. We will proceed now to our third speaker for today, Sauli Pohlman, Director of the Finnish Cybersecurity Center. Sauli, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And well, first of all, many thanks for the opportunity to be here today. As mentioned, my name is Sauli Pohlman. I'm heading a department in the National Cybersecurity Center of Finland, a department that's focused on among many other things, the new rising technologies and how we should respond to them in cooperation with our constituents. And our journey with 5G, it already started, I think, years back, 2017, perhaps, when our noses started telling us that, okay, this 5G thing is going to be a cornerstone of many things, the kind of future cities and how transport and work and leisure and everything gets organized and changed. And it's actually, I think it was a good point in Florian's introduction that with 5G we are getting the terahertz level frequencies eventually. Base stations in almost everywhere, XR, remote presence, even more granular location-based services. So it's a positive thing. It's the reason everybody is concerned of it is that it's so many things will rely on it. And of course, the concern is it's needed. It's the technology, not only 5G, but others, IoT and so on, the kind of keeps coming also closer and closer to our skins, so to say. So we need to do it properly. And yeah, back in 2017, we started thinking that, okay, hey, we are a pretty neutral country, a neutral, easy to approach regulator, known for some level of innovation and very good relations to our telcos and the network vendors. We have a long history of strong academia around telecom and security, thanks to the long history of vendor presence in Finland. And we also have a pretty long history in regulating mobile networks and telcos to kind of support their business risk-based controls. So many of the EU toolbox things, for example, they were already present in our local regulations. Not everything, but some key things. And well, yeah, our notice said that, okay, something needs to be done. We need to understand this better. So we started our own internal. This was back at that time, not connected to the EU activities. We started doing our first own internal 5G risk assessment. That was done together with the mentioned parties, the academia, industry. 3 major network vendors were involved in the workshops, and it was a desktop exercise to kind of make us understand what we need to understand better. One of the key findings was that, okay, we want to understand better the practical side of the risks, the standard and how the standard was flowing into the implementations. That was looking good, very good from many perspectives. But we wanted to see that, okay, what is there we don't actually see, what we need to be concerned of. So we decided that, okay, let's have a hackathon. And we had one end of last year, December 2019, I think, where the vendors would voluntarily bring in challenges, and we'd invite hackers basically from all around the world. It was an open event. Any hacker was free to join, given relevant expertise and background. And then we wanted to establish something where we can learn a bit together. The organizations and parties setting the challenges would learn a bit, and the hacker community would be able to train themselves, prepare for the time when the actual assignments through the companies they work with will come. Obviously, that produced knowledge also to us, which we can then kind of benefit from in our regulational work and flow it towards the Finnish telecom sector. And the whole idea of this is that, I mean, my organization is a regulator, so it doesn't really benefit much or produce much good if we know a lot. It's imminent that it's important that others, our close stakeholders, cooperating parties, they get the knowledge themselves. And we did actually learn a lot from the hackathon itself. I mean, it made us understand what are the questions we need to ask to be able to, for example, implement the EU toolbox that was very much cooking at that point of time. Made us understand that, okay, it's basically a big paradigm change from a very telco specific environment to a more of an open commodity hardware, commodity software stack based environment. It's almost like protecting a cloud infrastructure which has network sockets in the wild. I mean, anyone can connect. So we realized, okay, we need to apply monitoring, firewalling between the core and the edge. we need to somehow monitor the service bus. Trusted computing needs to be somehow applied, because it's everything, or a lot of the intelligence of the network is still based on physically exposed environments. So some kind of combination of rule-based, perhaps machine learning-based set of algorithms to understand what's happening in the network needs to be established. And that's what actually brings us to today, when after the both EU-led and our internal risk assessment, the hackathon, the analysis of the findings, continuous discussion with the parties, we decided that, hey, we actually do need a common national baseline, a 5G reference architecture and processes. And that's the next step we will be doing now in the coming months. Basically, again, inviting our telcos, vendors to the same table to discuss how, on a very practical level, the kind of patching, monitoring, network management should be done. We have a lot of instructions already out there that say, keep everything updated, but then everybody who's maintained a real network knows that it's not that simple. So we need to take this to as detailed, viable, process-wise level as possible. So that's the focus area on the coming months, and then our idea is that if everybody's satisfied with the outcome, we will actually go and have a hackathon next year. Might be a remote event due to the known circumstances, but anyway, a hackathon session where we put these practices, these monitoring and filtering guidelines, the baseline to test, and see how it actually resists against the hacker community doing another try against the environments and networks that are now applying the things we've defined. And again, it's not of a lot of value if we know stuff. So the idea is that it will be a public document then, if everybody's happy with it, and it's tested in the simulated real life environment. So anyone can then take it, use it, comment on it. And obviously, 6G will come one day. The one of the goals of all this is to also cooperate with the academia, the vendors, to ensure that the learnings, the findings from the 5G discussion and a lot of work that's done around it are taken as early as possible into the 6G standardization process, and making 6G as kind of secure to own and operate as possible, thinking its fundamentals from the beginning, from the perspective that it also needs to be able to be operated in a secure way. So yeah, that's our story here up north. Thanks all, and looking forward for the questions and conversation.
Thank you, Sauli, for sharing the Finnish approach and experience to 5G security. To keep up the good work now, we are heading to our debate session with the panelists and, of course, with the questions of the audience. Before we start, I would like to remind our speakers that in case they wish to also pose questions to each other, they are more welcome to do so. Raise your hand and go ahead. To kick off the debate, I will pick my first victim, which will be Julie. I think we are all quite curious, Julie, to my apologies. We have the last speaker for today, which will be Mikko Kärikite, Chief Product Security Officer from Ericsson. My apologies, Mikko, for this misunderstanding. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and absolutely no problem. I would have kept my word anyway, but thank you for introducing me. And shout out to Sauli. It was my personal pleasure to be on site in the actual hackathon, and I can tell you that I have been able to reconnect back with some of those hackers that I met in Oulu on that magnificent weekend. So I can tell you that it was not only about technical findings, it was very much about the social network and expanding that also. Super happy. I hope we can do it again. I want to talk about 5G security and what it means. And what in our point of view is most important is really the end user experience of the security. And that comes from the 4 main pillars. It starts with the standards, so we have interoperability and security protocols in place for the whole industry. Then comes our part, the vendor design, development, and testing processes, where we make sure that the nodes and the functions are secure. Then comes the network configuration, the actual hardening and deployment of the network, integrating with the previous existing hardware and actually making that secure. And then finally, the operations procedures, the operational security practice that is really very much about the day-to-day activities, not only expanding capacity, but also monitoring the performance and monitoring the security. And this is where the information exchange mentioned about threats and vulnerabilities comes into play also. So it's these 4 pillars. There is no silver bullet to security of a 5G network or mobile network. And this is exactly why in Ericsson we think that the European 5G security toolbox is the best currently available policy tool globally. It is a holistic view, and I can state that from my position as the CPSO on a strategic level, but I can guarantee that in my career, being hands-on investigating the cyber attacks in all continents with our customers, the operators, I can confirm that these risks are recognized because of a reason, and these controls proposed in the toolbox are there for a reason, and we think that it works. If we look closer to a couple of the things that have been also mentioned earlier in the 5G security discussion in EU especially, there were a lot of discussion about source code reviews. Should we just review all the source code of all the vendors? Well, that doesn't provide only but one bit of data to all the data that you need about the security. It still comes together from the 4 pillars, and that would be only targeting the vendors. Then there has been some quite romantic views about open source and how open source can help to secure. But actually, a lot of open source comes down to individuals contributing to the global software ecosystem. And sometimes those software come together from endless amount of dependencies. So a mistake in one of those dependencies could actually violate the security in the end of the supply chain. And then what is open for us, the good guys, it's also open for the bad guys. So they have more time and resources to study those software projects that, for example, are open and in critical places. For this reason, I think that a company like Ericsson that has a massive a machine working with code and working with these products day after day after day and year after year has the tools to actually verify, and that is why it takes so long to verify and test the code that we ship into our customers' networks before it goes live. If we look closer to standards, that is one of these instrumental pillars for security of 5G networks. And it comes, the most important party standardizing 5G is 3GPP. And 3GPP is setting the interoperability and many other like security standards that are used in 5G. And sometimes some say that this model has not been able to deliver on the openness, affordability, and reach. And I will challenge that because today we have more mobile phone users than we have toothbrush users in the world. I think that this industry with the global standardization has done something that needs to be recognized and is working quite well. It's probably one of the biggest inventions we have had as a humankind, and it's working wonderful. And the main motivation of the standardization continues to be interoperability between the vendors, the operators, and the device manufacturers. Then it also supports the multi-vendor setup. So you can, already today, you can, thanks to standards, you can have different vendors in your radio access network, in your core network, operations and support systems, business support system, and you name it. But another important aspect is security, because the standards actually are for possibility to verify the properties such as the interface definition, the cryptographic algorithm, the security protocols, and so on. And the whole idea why we standardize these security aspects is that we are using commonly agreed those best practices that we well know and are working for the industry, and we commonly together decide on what is best for the evolution of communication that we are using. Now it is 5G. But the standardization is maybe thought as some monolithic thing that happens somewhere in caves that we don't see. But it actually comes together from many different standardization for us, where 3GPP has the important role in mobile technology to actually standardize the architecture of the network and the interoperability and define the interfaces and so on. But then it actually comes in 5G, for example, to IETF that defines the security protocols that such as IPsec, EAP, and many others that are used in the 5G technology. As well, the 5G is the first evolution of this mobile network technology that is based on cloud native and virtual technologies. So this means that ETSI, ISG, NFV is important because the security for those network functions, the virtual network functions, is coming defined there. And then, of course, the crypto solutions, the encryption algorithms like AES are standardized by NIST. And then finally, something that is very great to see for the mobile industry, the NESAS, the Network Equipment Security Assurance Specification, is a collaboration between the 3GPP and the GSMA. And all these different components that I mentioned are bringing together what is needed in standardization for 5G to guarantee the security. But again, I would like to remind that standardization is not only the key to security of these live deployed networks. Neither is the vendor process, even that is very important. But it comes down to these 4 pillars where you have standardization to agree on the interoperability and the security protocol, security algorithms, the architecture. It comes to the development, design, and test processes of a vendor like us, Ericsson. Comes to network configuration, the deployment phase where we are actually integrating the new devices, the new network functions into the existing networks or completely new networks, and making sure that it is secure after deployment. And then the operation that is absolutely instrumental for continuing to have secure network even after everything else was secure before that. And what these standards define is that they ensure that we have multi-vendor, multi-operator environment where the end user can, with the device of their choice, roam around and enjoy the similar experience, mobile network experience that they have anywhere they go. And in Ericsson, our cornerstone, making sure, one of my focus areas, one of my babies, is security reliability model. That is our framework, one of those frameworks I'm sure that many software vendors have, but making sure that we are not only looking at security in the very core of our development activities, but also taking the whole supply chain and the whole life cycle of the products that we produce to make sure that they maintain security as long as need be. This is actually end to my initial statement here, and I'm very happy to join the discussion. Thank you, Visiola, very much.
Thank you, Mikko, and very beautiful background. We will jump now to the discussion. We have, I think, around 20-25 minutes to have a debate among the panelists, as well as to receive questions from the audience. So please keep sending us questions. And as I initially said, I would like to start the discussion with Julie. from the European Commission. I think everyone is looking forward to better understand what will be the next step in the work of the Commission to secure 5G technologies. I think when the toolbox was published, there was this deadline by October this year to actually publish a report, or I don't know if it will be publicly accessible, the assessment between the Commission and the Member States for the recommendation of the Commission's for the 2019 recommendation from the Commission on 5G security and ways forward. So maybe, Julie, you can provide us some details on this. Will it be public now in October, and what will these ways forward be?
Thank you for the question, Visiola. So, well, indeed, we are now, of course, in the process of doing this review, but it's really a process. So the emphasis at the moment is, and it should be, on implementation of the toolbox, and this, was a very ambitious process in terms of timeline from the very beginning. We were really glad that we were able to come forward and go through all these steps in very short period of time. And the progress report in July also showed that member states took that very seriously, immediately put in place some actions and started that. But at the same time, it takes some time. Those national processes take some time. Therefore, we are now looking at this review, looking at what we want to assess, but also look for the future, what could be the next steps. And we are at the moment reflecting as to what is the best moment to take stock. But it's an ongoing process, as I'm saying. The toolbox was just the beginning of the journey. There is a lot of work now to be done to put that in practice, and it's going to be also not something static. The risks are going to continue to evolve. The technology is going to continue to evolve. So we want to be able to factor all this in to how we will approach the next steps. And I really grateful for the panelists' insights and suggestions, because this is exactly what we're doing at the moment, where we're collecting also views and ideas about how things went up to now, and what could be improved, or where we should be looking next. So I really took note of a range of different very interesting ideas. And also happy to hear that from Finland's side and everywhere else also, in many other places in Europe, there's a strong emphasis now on operationalizing things and continuing to operationalize, looking at 5G, but also even starting to consider how this would be taken forward in 6G too.
Thank you, Julie. I think everyone is really looking forward to see what will be the next steps from the Commission. To further go ahead with the debate, I would be really curious to have your opinion on the implementation of the 5G toolbox until this very moment. From my understanding, member states are working on it and taking measures, but I see that each of them is in a way taking different approaches. So for example, we have in Germany that they go through with the security catalog, and I know also testing will be part of the process. Then you have an example like France, where I think 5G equipment will need to go through the authorization of the Prime Minister. So I would really be keen to see your point of view on the implementation of the toolbox by member states, in a coordinated and, of course, harmonized approach. Anyone wishes to start, or I have to pick my next victim? Florian? Okay, so Lee raised the hand. Okay, you can go ahead.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, it's indeed true that more or less all the member states, at least the ones we've been in communications and collaboration with, are now steaming ahead with the gradual implementation. And I think it's important to note that the initial level in each state is varying, and the culture of to which extent the security aspects of the mobile networks have been regulated, that varies a lot. And obviously there's a long technical legacy, operational legacy from the existing network. So it's indeed a very gradual thing where member states will probably move with slightly different initial approaches, and then over time converge towards something that becomes then closer to each other. And that's to a certain extent how I see it. It also should be. The initial states, they differ, and of course each member state should do their risk assessment on what's their readiness and availability to implement yet another toolbox initiative or item in the way that they tackle the biggest perceived risks first. And as mentioned, it's also a moving target. This is now the first iteration, the first instance of the toolbox in 5 years. World will again look slightly different. Technology has evolved. We've learned a lot, so it probably also needs to be a living document. In Finland, we are in a good position because as I mentioned, we do have a legislatory background and the regulational culture on these things. So we already were on a relatively nice level in terms of the implementation of many of the toolbox aspects. Plus, in addition, regulation, it's a very important tool in the toolkit, but so is the kind of business risk-based work which happens at each of the telecoms operator. We are very much in favor of that, at least in Finland, because it's timely, it's organically built into the cooperation between the telco and the telecom operators, vendors, and therefore it tackles many things before they even become huge problems. And while we don't regulate always every single detail, we do still monitor the implementation of the business risk approach and ask questions from our telcos regarding what kind of business risk based choices they have made and how things are evolving on that side. And it's a nice fluent cooperation and of course based on a mutual trust.
Thank you, Soli. Please, Florian.
Yeah, just shortly, just some reflections here as sort of the new player in this area, and also some perspectives. I think one of the main and what Soli says, I can fully understand. I have worked in a national cybersecurity center, and that's a national security perspective. If you look at 5G, the interesting part is, and I come back a little bit to the beginning, and I think it was also picked up by Soli, is if you look at 5G discussions, it always tends to go towards the security and trust elements, and also see the questions on the right, digital sovereignty. Whereas if you look to the other side and you tilt it to the connectivity, the speed, all the options, and that's where the Commission, I think 2-3 years ago, was driving it. And then we got discussions around digital sovereignty. We got discussions around trust and security. So it makes more sense to have those more positive discussions at this European level. And the difficulty comes, and Julie must know this because she deals with that on a daily basis, is the challenge on how do you get member states to feel that they still own their own security, they can make their own decisions based on feeling comfortable, versus the European Union that wants to harmonize. And at the same time, you have to deal with different vendors and telecom providers that also have more of a global view. I think it's all in the harmonization, and especially there, I really applaud the cybersecurity toolbox. Really is objective and inclusive, and we cannot stress this enough. It's kind of a new model that allows for all these different factors to weigh in. And I would really like to see that continuing. And of course, you'll have differences between how country X implements it versus country Y, simply because the maturity or the size or the experience with telcos is different. And we're in the European Security Summit, so that's also a focus that we cannot deny. At the same time, if we want to strive towards a European security where people feel comfortable and countries feel comfortable, sometimes you got to give. And that means that a mature state or authority needs to share a little bit more than they've done in the past, and they will get something in return, because in the end it's about a coherent and a holistic approach towards a security of 5G deployment. Just a little bit of reflection, because this discussion will continue forever. Let's be honest. This won't end now, but yeah, just some reflection.
Thank you, Florian. Please, Mikko.
Thanks.
Yeah, just to add that, completely agree with Florian there. The toolbox is really good. As I said earlier, it is probably the best policy tool available globally. And it is based on what Julie was referring into, very concise, very well done risk assessment that is assessing the risks in the 5G deployment. So it is a holistic process. And as a security management professional, I have to say that when you have risks and you're aiming to address those risks, you really cannot pick and choose and leave one risk unaddressed. You actually should deploy the toolbox as is and completely in a holistic manner. And then you will have that mitigated risk posture that Europe is striving for with the toolbox.
Thank you, Mikko. Julie, would you like to add up to the discussion?
Yes, thank you. Well, no, I fully agree that it's a delicate balance. So on the one hand, the toolbox itself recognizes that the measures will be adapted when put in place in the national context according to different factors, resources, capabilities, the market, so that the stage of rollout of 5G. So there might be different aspects that will influence the detail of how the measures are implemented. But that being said, I mean, while we can see that member states will use, sometimes primary legislation, sometimes secondary legislation, all of this is not really of major importance. The important thing is that every member state is looking at the risks at hand and making sure that they address all those risks. And we have seen that there is a very strong commitment to taking this toolbox approach that was agreed by all member states. That again, on the 1st and 2nd of October, the heads of state recalled in the European Council conclusions that it is really important and the priority to fully implement it. So there is this very strong political commitment across the EU to stick to this coordinated approach, which provides for a framework that can be adapted to national circumstances, but at the same time really gives guidance on how to converge in doing that. And there is guidance on high-level views on what kind of assets should be considered more sensitive and therefore subject to more attention. There is guidance about how to go about looking at suppliers' risks. So there is quite a lot of agreed common aspects and elements in those policy documents, and we're seeing that these are being really factored into the national implementation processes, of course, at various levels of speed, and also depending on the measures. The progress report in July highlighted that there are some of them that are already more implemented by more member states than others, and this can have also several explanations. But the other thing that is important is that while this is happening, we're continuing to work at EU level together on capacity building, on info sharing, exchanging best practices, looking at the most complex measures in the toolbox, and there's a lot of information exchanges among member states on how to implement this measure, that measure, and what can we do together to have a better understanding of practical aspects, etc. So this is taking place in parallel. We are really working hard to bring member states together as much as possible.
Thank you, Julie. Yes, Mikko, please.
No, I would just love to touch on what Julie said about the sensitive parts of the networks, because as a security professional looking at these networks for some time, more than 10 years being dealing with the networks, I can say that discussion sometimes takes a little bit funny turns, because already 5 years ago in Europe, European operators came to me as a product security professional in Ericsson about the concerns they had about the security of the radio access network nodes. And then it was clear already, they had clear threat models, how the threat actors would be abusing and accessing and misusing the radio access network in that point in time. And no wonder, because if we look at the 5G RAN, Ericsson 5G RAN today has 4 times more code than the Mars Curiosity rover. So it is not a dumb hardware pipe. It's a very, very sophisticated software product. And I think that this is exactly why this dialogue needs to take place, and we have to share these views in this kind of forum so that we all understand the same reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mikko. Very interesting discussions. To bring now, I think, a bit the topic on a somehow more technical level. Mikko, stay with me because you are next in line. So I think we hear a lot nowadays about Open RAN, open platforms, open sources, as a proposed solution to the security of 5G. So I think as a security guy coming from Ericsson, like what would be your view here? And then, of course, I would be more than glad if other speakers would add their thoughts.
Oh, thanks, Visiola. So without open source, we wouldn't have anything in this world. I think that all the digital platforms that we have are really based on, and in a large part, they're based on open source. And this innovative effort of the community globally is absolutely needed. What I think that is important to remember is that open source is not a silver bullet. It doesn't mean that if it is available for review, that people actually will review the code. We have great examples from just a few years ago. Take some of the most notorious vulnerabilities that broke the internet. There were software components like OpenSSL that had a severe critical vulnerability that affected everybody. Even we went through the portfolio and looked at what are the impacts on us. And then in the end, it was found that this project had been running for tens of years, and it had not been developed by more than a couple developers in the end. And then when everybody in the industry looked at the mirror and looked at, so how much did we review that code in that point in time? I don't think that it was sufficient. So we need to remember that what is open doesn't mean that it is always reviewed by hundreds or thousands of professionals. In a business like ours, where the in-service performance is absolutely critical, mobile networks need to be running at every given moment of a day and year. So we need to be in our internal processes to verify, test, and validate that every piece of code, is it open or proprietary, is actually according to those standards that we have. And that is also what makes it so heavy, the process to actually make sure that when it ships then to the networks of our customers, that it is secure. So as I said also in the beginning, these dependencies, so, open source projects are depending on hundreds or thousands of other open source projects that may or may not be developed in a structured manner. And then if you have one individual or a group of friends that are working in a magnificent, innovative open source project, do they have all the access to static code analysis, the penetration testing capabilities, skills, and tools that some company like Ericsson, for example, has in their continuous development and integration lifecycle? So those are some of these things that I think that we need to be mindful about, embracing the open source, but being critical about the security also.
Thank you, Mikko. Please, Florian.
Yeah, thanks, Mikko. And to be do have to respond to this, obviously, and you understand. I think I fully agree with what Mikko says. Only with the same arguments he uses, we're actually kind of in favor of that. So we think that open source is one of the options to drive towards secure, simply because of the the reasons of it being open. Of course, there are restrictions on what should be open source. You cannot open it all up. If you just think about, I always like it, Mikko. I think you've mentioned this example before, and that the amount of lines of codes that are in the system, and it's just insane at the moment. I also remember that if you speak to a car manufacturers, the amount of code these days, the car is just a computer on wheels with billions and billions of lines of code. You cannot protect it. At the same time, openness and transparency is something we strongly support, also as Open Run. And to drive a little bit further, I also think, and then moving a little bit again towards this policy domain, is options like vulnerability disclosure, to look into those elements as well. Because I think one of the main concerns is about the development of the technology, and we need to have insights in that. And that's one of the things that as Microsoft we've really nurtured, and we really think that that's one of the ways forward. Again, this needs to be done in harmonization together with all the stakeholders involved. I just wanted to share that a little bit, but openness is one of the things that we do support a little bit more, I think, than what Mikko says. But the objective is the same.
Thank you, Florian. So Lee, maybe you would like to add anything, as representing the Finnish Cybersecurity Center on this.
We'll be happy to. Yes, openness is a positive thing. It enables a lot of things. Diversity, being the principal ability for a community to more openly review the code. But of course, the networks, in the end, they are very complex unions of tons of different open source, closed source libraries, and in the end, code is written by people. Bugs are created when code is being written. That's more or less almost a law of nature. Then bugs, especially bugs that have security implications, they are prevented by controls like review, testing, implementation of SDL. Also DevSecOps, in the ownership end, whoever puts all the components together to a live network, these interactions are complex. So I think it's a positive thing. Obviously comes with, I don't call them issues, but new aspects. Open source vulnerabilities tend to be open, in public. So while with the previous generations, the networks were built, obviously probably open source was a part of those as well, but not perhaps as centrally as today. And then open source means that we still need to ensure that the code is written. There's controls on weeding out bugs from it. It doesn't matter where these controls are. The code control can be within the open source project itself. It can be also in the end of the vendors who actually take these libraries and open source as part of their products. And it comes with the cost of having to most probably patch even more timely, because when something like Heartbleed is out, then it's out, and it takes 16 hours at most for someone to write a reproducer, and then anyone who can turn on a computer and Google basically has the weapon to exploit it. So let's say that moving towards commodity components in the networks, it's an opportunity, has a lot of positive business impact. but also it's a paradigm change that we need to adapt to. I mean, everybody will need to adapt to. So interesting times.
Thank you, Suli. Yes, Mikko, last remark.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we definitely support openness, and I think one of the biggest, evidence of that is that there are more mobile phone users than toothbrush. I think that's clear that the whole industry is quite open, and we are definitely supporting that.
Thank you, Mikko. I will pick a question actually from the audience, which seems quite interesting. To what extent is the 5G toolbox part of Europe's broader drive for digital sovereignty? How can we manage potential market disruptions as we reduce the number of 5G suppliers in Europe? Julie, maybe you would pick on the digital sovereignty part, and then we can go ahead with the rest.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's a good question. Thanks a lot. Well, of course, cybersecurity of 5G and digital sovereignty are very closely linked. The digital sovereignty is clearly extremely high on the strategic agenda of the Commission for many reasons, again, highlighted also by what we're experiencing at the moment. And from the perspective of security, I mean, this is a pillar in the toolbox that you need to look at capacities and how to have a good, robust, diverse, sustainable supply chain in order to avoid dependencies, and that is something that is part of the policy actions that we are taking. So we are seeing that what is different maybe from other areas with 5G is that we can rely on very strong EU capacities, but also on capacities coming from elsewhere. So there's an open market in Europe with this good side that we have also very strong players on the market, which are EU-based. So in that sense, we're pretty well positioned, but of course it's important going forward to continue to promote such a diverse and sustainable supply chain.
Thank you, Julie. Please, Florian.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Thanks a lot. Now, this is exactly why referring back to the policy considerations is what we really appreciated in the toolbox, and also in the whole process as seen so far is the element of diversification, not only to allow a market to grow, but also to be open against the difficult discussions that we see around digital sovereignty, strategic autonomy, tech nationalism, 1,000 different words, and we all feel from a political sense where it's aimed at. To have a diversity and to have a risk-based approach towards deploying your systems. Just again to reconfirm and to also show our appreciation of that, because I think that's our ticket out of this difficult discussion. And not letting citizens, consumers, industry have lesser opportunities and availabilities to grow and to be successful.
Thank you, Florian. It's a very interesting discussion, and I'm sure that we would keep on going for another hour like this. There are endless questions, but it's time, I think, to wrap up the session. So I would like all the speakers to have a final statement, a final key message from this session before handing over to James. So who would like to start? Florian.
Shoot.
Yeah.
No, just last statement, I applaud the work that the ENISA Commission is doing, and please keep on including industry players like now. Be open to that discussion, lend an ear, and take those considerations, as you've done already, seriously, and then I'm sure we're going to all be using 5G technology and even 6G technology in a secure and resilient way for the future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Florian. Julie?
Thank you. Well, I'll maybe just thank again the other panelists also for underlying the efforts that have been done at EU level to have this risk-based objective approach to 5G cybersecurity. I think this is something that we really now want to further promote as much as possible, and of course in close partnership with industry, with all the players, because everyone is going to have a role to play in making sure that we have those 5G secure networks that are really so important for Europe's future competitiveness. So and also the recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. Miko, next in line. I feel like a teacher, you know, calling on my students.
Definitely. Yeah, so the toolbox is based on the risk assessment that is well made. It needs to be deployed as is in holistical manner. I think doing that, Europe will have secure 5G ecosystem and 5G services to all the citizens. I think that this process is well ongoing. There are a lot of good insights in this panel today. We're supporting openness, as said earlier, and just want to make sure that we're in the dialogue what we have in the industry and with the public, that we don't confuse that there are some silver bullets like operating system security or open source security, but it is a complete whole that needs to be addressed all together as one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miko. And Sauli from the Nordics.
Thank you. A lot's been already said, but let's keep in mind that this is a positive change, a positive opportunity. We're dealing with very, very long value chains and chains of trust. In one end, there's the EU Commission, ENISA, the national regulators, telecoms operators, vendors, subcontractors, obviously end users, be it companies or private individuals, and as mentioned, there's no single thing that will solve this end-to-end equation, and this can't be done in silos. Collaboration, communication, information sharing, those are the key, and that's all. Let's stay positive.
Okay, thank you very much, Sauli. I think we are perfectly on time. To close the session, I would really like to thank all the speakers. I think I personally get out of this session with a very positive feeling that the toolbox is well welcomed, I think, from the public sector and also the industry. We had quite some interesting discussions, some opposite views in a way about open sources, open platforms, but still good for the debate. And I think we are much looking forward also to the work of the Commission and what is coming next in terms of security of 5G technologies in Europe. Thank you again to all the speakers, and I think it is time now for the showcase session, which James will explain more on this. So I thank again also Forum Euro for this opportunity, and I would like to hand the floor now to James, which will explain more on the showcase session. Thank you, James.
Thank you very much, Viziola, for your moderation. They're much appreciated, and also thank you to Julian, Florian. Sorry, Julie, not Julian.
Julie, actually, she's French.
Florian, Miko, and Sauli for that excellent discussion. A panel of real experts there, and I have to compliment you all on how well you communicated your ideas and positions with such clarity. So thank you very much indeed, and to time actually, which is the other thing. As I mentioned earlier, and as Viziola was also mentioning there, we're now moving to our next session, which will focus on encryption, and this will be led by the Internet Society, one of the partners for the event. The session will start immediately following the close of this session. So you can navigate to the Stages tab, and you will see then within there the encryption session going live. We will take a lunch break then at around 12:30 CET and reconvene at 12:45 CET. So I look forward to seeing you all back then. So stick around for the next session on encryption, and we shall see you a little bit later. So thank you very much.